Hello and welcome to another Fireside Chat with Dragon Combat Club. Today we have a couple of guests with us to talk about how minority groups pit each other against each other and how we are often put in the position where we have to fight each other in a lot of the same circumstances and the same battles that we're fighting. All right, so let's go ahead and just do a quick round of introductions. Milda, if you want to introduce yourself really quick.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Milda. I've been with Dragon Combat Club since January of last year, and I started as a complete novice. And I always appreciate being able to partake in these chats and being able to discuss ideas and to learn something new. And I'll pass it on to the next person.
Hey, well, I'm Josiah. I've been dealing with Brave and martial arts and activism for actually about maybe 2 or 3 years now, and I would like to discuss a lot of the situations that have been happening in Chinatown and Manhattan in general, because that brought great interest to me. So I have to thank John for being able to bring me here today. Yeah, that's it. I would just like to move it on.
I'm Alex. I've been participating with DCC for about, I think, since last July or so. And now I'm kind of back, and doing classes. So thank you for having me.
Noah, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'm Noah. Been in DCC since 2020. Been in martial arts since I was 15, got out, then did a whole bunch of stuff. Now I'm back in it, kind of like it, going through memory lane again. So I'm actually glad to be here once again, discussing issues that really plague our society.
Hey, I'm Hen. I'm one of the original co-founders of Dragon Combat Club, also one of the one of the first members, along with Noah. Prior to my time in DCC, I trained martial arts on and off for the last 10 years. Competed in grappling, competed in wrestling. I've done a lot of Muay Thai. Learned some weapons from John and a few other great individuals. And yeah, just doing what I can to contribute to society, keep our own folks safe, and be an effective advocate for other groups as well. And sometimes it doesn't go together, right? And we have to find a way for it to do so. And that's one of the reasons why I am part of DCC and why I started.
Thank you, Henry. So I just wanted to, again, illustrate the idea that we're speaking as individuals, right? We all have our unique perspectives on where we are in this fight. And there's a lot of minority groups pitted against each other. I mean, oftentimes we have heard about BLM, Black Lives Matter. But however, there was a slogan right after Black Lives Matter popped up, including Asian Lives Matter. And I mean, I guess I'll open up to the floor. How do you think that antagonism between the Black Lives Matter movement, the Asian Lives Matter movement kind of conflicted or, coincided with each other?
Well, I could bring up from my experience, me being old as hell. I think he could bring it.
Noah, are you talking?
Far. Yeah.
Yeah, he is.
Am I muted?
I can hear him.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. Like I said, being old, you see a lot of stuff. We as far well in my time, when the Rodney King riot started, and there were fights between Asians and blacks. It was my first time seeing that on TV. A lot of carnage that happened. So how did this perpetuate into these two factions? Well, society just basically turned, the both of us into like some ring in the Hunger Games. You know what I mean? It's like, who will get second place? Who will actually sit with us at the table? It's kind of a nasty way of basically just we'll put it this way. It's just a nasty way of just putting two groups of people against each other, having to duke it out. But in terms of when people were getting murdered and Black Lives Matter came up, and some Asians that came up, especially the Asian conservatives, which they were the most vocal. From my experience, just speaking from my experience, they were saying Asian lives matter. So my life doesn't matter also. But they just don't understand all lives matter when Black lives matter. But it's just that when people perpetuate such statements like all lives matter into their own contexts, it just defeats the purpose. Is it just saying all lives matter to just basically just try to diffuse the whole entire issue? Now, in terms of, sure, Asian lives do matter, definitely. But the thing is, to actually perpetuate BLM versus ALM in terms of Asian lives matter is just an example of how society plays power games with both groups in order to actually force one to the bottom of the hole.
I believe that a lot of the conflict that started immediately was because, like Noah was trying to say, or what he was saying, all lives matter was like a protest to the protest of Black Lives Matter, because all lives do matter, but Black lives were not being treated as if they mattered, which was the point of saying Black Lives Matter. But certain people started treating that, like I've seen the way that it was received on Instagram or other forms of social media, that when the term Asian Lives Matter came up, people started treating it, especially my people, started treating it as it was the same type of counter argument or protest to their protest, even though it was not. It came out of, that term Asian Lives Matter came out of a dire need of what was going on in Chinatown, what was going on in San Francisco, what was going on across America, really. Because, I mean, the hate crimes have risen up almost 360%. So I would say that it came, like, there is conflict because it comes from lack of understanding and a lack of understanding the context needed in those situations. There's not enough discourse between the two communities to understand what's going on in the communities of others sometimes, and that can cause massive misunderstandings.
And that's what's been happening in the community, is just the massive inaccuracies or misunderstandings that any one movement is more important than the next, right? The fact that we have to say all lives matter is utterly defeats the purpose of what, all lives matter mean. We all know that all lives matter. However, it's more of the importance that there's individual focus on those minority groups who are especially dying at a faster rate against police brutality, against, we're going to talk about this super jail or this mega jail in Chinatown that's being built. It's like the question, right?
Even the men's shelter.
The question is, why are these things being built in minority slums or groups where these people reside, as opposed to the Upper East Side or the Upper West Side, or working on and actually rehabbing Rikers Island, which again, Rikers Island has been there for a very long time. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And there needs to be a certain amount of rehab that needs to be done. But even as I'm talking to people who had just come out of the prison system, out of Rikers, they say Rikers is the all-time low. There's actually more correctional officers right now at Rikers than there are prisoners. Okay, so something to think about.
I don't know too much about Black Lives Matter until, of course, after George Floyd. And at the time, I was like, okay, this is cool, I guess, because the ideology was we're probably on the bandwagon and all that. And then I realized that most of my Black male friends on Facebook, they did not support BLM, but yet my Black female friends did. And so I went straight up to a few of my Black male friends, and he was like, yeah, they were founded by lesbians. And it was like, they don't support men. Black females, Black lesbians, or homosexuals for that matter, excuse my language, by the way, support it, right? So these were his words. I'm not like, making stuff up. And then he said the movement, if it was called Black Lives Matter also, right, he would have been down with that, but not simply if it was Black Lives Matter, right? And so so I gained some insight into that. And then, this ALM thing, I'm with John and of course Josiah here, that, yeah, it was, kind of argument that wasn't really necessary, right? And it was, trying to defeat the purpose. I could just say that when the Asians got killed, or when people of other color, especially Black folks, came out to the protest wearing the Asian Lives Matter shirt, that touched my heart. Now, we do not want to exclude the fact that Asians also supported the Black Lives Matter movement too. A lot of Asians did, and they were marching with BLM at the time, right? So the fact that the Black people also came to support us, it really touched my heart. And it was really not about like the race disparities per se, all right? Second thing I want to say, there is a difference between the relationship, if we must talk about this, between Black folks with Chinese folks and Black folks with Korean folks. Two different relationships altogether. Let's just put that out there right now. I'm not saying which races, but there's not about superiority, but technically, and what's that called, that word? All right, fundamentally, the differences, and there's been a history, right? When Koreans and Blacks, they had a real serious problem. Back in the days, we're talking about LA, right? Right? You know what I'm talking about? LA, that was a big thing, right? But Chinese and Blacks, we've been in this country for long enough. You know what I'm saying? I don't even want to talk about the oppression, right? But we know we've been around. Our villages got burned down too. I'm talking about in America, right? We was used, in the mining where we had bombs strapped to us. We were willing to do those jobs that the Irish, the Italians, and the other immigrants were not willing to do. All right. So, I just want to put that out there. There's also problems in between Korean and Chinese too. Let's not exclude that. And Japanese, let's not exclude that. So I want to throw it out there that this is not just a concentrated problem, but this is a very serious problem that has many different ways of looking at it. It's not simply Black and Asian, or Black and white, or Asian and white, and so on and so forth. All right. So I just want to throw those 2 cents out there for that matter.
Yeah, what you're talking about actually does make a lot of sense, because the situation is very nuanced. It's not as black and white literally, or it's not just Black versus Asian or anything like that.
Right.
Because there has been a history of the Asian community and the Black community standing together in solidarity for at least 80 years now. Because you have the Black Panthers, and the Black Panthers were literally they went and tried to help any group that they can. They had other groups march with them, whether it was the West Coast, especially in Oakland, their marches, their protests that they used to have in San Francisco and things like that, that was huge, because those two communities used to show out almost more than anyone else did.
When Malcolm X got shot at the Apollo Theater, was it not a Japanese woman who ran to him to tend to him first? Was it not that? Yeah. Right? When a lot of people ran because they were scared for their lives, sure. But she showed compassion.
Ran to him.
Yeah. And also look, there is problem between Asians and Asians too. Don't think that we don't have problems with our own people, even if it's Chinese and Chinese. Forget about Korean and Chinese, or Japanese and Japanese with Koreans, or Filipino and Chinese, or Filipino of Koreans for that matter. All right, so there's a lot of things in between the lines that we would like to talk about, probably in a future episode.
Well, no, we can talk about it now. Actually, the
yeah.
interesting thing is that the history of minorities in America is remarkably similar.
Yeah.
Obviously Black Americans who came to this country against their will, and also Chinese Americans, for example. Both of these groups have been in America since the dawn of the founding of this country.
Some of us have even been here before that.
Even before that,
Yeah.
exactly. But we've always been used as that crutch. We've always been used as that, hey, they're a convenient group to exploit, so why not continue to exploit them? And unfortunately, 300 years afterwards, we are still seeing the same problem, right? People don't realize there's a lot of solidarity and a lot of mutual understanding between how Asians and Blacks got to this country. It's unfortunate that people don't know the history behind what we're talking about, right? And this is the reason why we also have these fireside chats to relay the thoughts as well as the history. Personally, I'm a second, third generation Asian American, but there have been Asian Americans that have been here for well over 6 generations, 10 generations, right?
Yeah.
And so they've been here literally since the founding of this country.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, let's say, I don't mean to throw out Italian, right? But there was a time they were considered the white N-word of Europe.
And then the Irish were.
And the Irish too. And
Greeks.
yeah.
And now it's Albanians and stuff like that.
Yeah, there's always like a scapegoat race or several at once.
Or an
The
ethnic
weakers
group,
that
yeah.
don't seem to fight back as hard, right? And then those would be the sideline and scapegoat one, as it appears, so to speak.
Well, this is also the reason why we're called a minority as well. It's because out of all the other minorities, we are probably, I would say, the freshest, at least here on the East Coast.
Right. I hear you. Yeah, I don't mean to laugh, but right.
But again, like a lot of Asians come into this country and they don't necessarily assimilate or have to assimilate, but it agrees with white culture. Right, because we're, unfortunately, Asians are all about respect and culture and understanding the paradigm of where we are. And it's unfortunate because, you hear all the time that America's supposed to be this melting pot, right? It's like, in any other country, I wouldn't be able to be such good friends with Josiah here. Like, let's be honest.
But like Africa, maybe, yeah. In the motherland, we good. But besides, there are quite a few countries where, you would be stared at the wrong way if we were even walked into a bar together, anything like that. America is a place of opportunities, but we have to acknowledge why and how those opportunities came to arrive. And I mean, look, even the exploitation of Native Americans is somebody that has Native ancestry myself. This place is a melting pot, but they did try to remove certain things of other cultures to make it more palpable to themselves so they could stay in control. And doing that, you play a divide and conquer type of game, because look, dividing and conquering 2 communities that were together now, look at how much chaos that's caused. You have people getting the wrong ideas, people making misunderstandings, things like that. We could have been supporting each other's rallies in full force, like how we used to with the Black Panthers. Black Panthers, I mean, look, even the Japanese and the Chinese community armed the Black Panthers with guns because they knew that the Black Panthers would fight for them just as much as they fight for themselves. So it's just, there has to be another wave of unity between the communities, and that comes from having talks like this and having understanding like this, being able to talk about the history, talk about the oppression, but talk about how to move forward and learn from those things instead of using them as a crutch as well.
Absolutely.
Back to the minority thing, right? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
There's one thing I kind of wanted to mention was that a lot of, we talk about like we need talks, right? But why is there a absence of conversation? Or why are the conversations out there very vapid, very shallow, very meaningless? And this is something that, the Asian American community has come to terms with the last 2 years. And I think it resulted in a lot of tensions between different minority groups. As you know, anti-Asian racism has been here, for centuries, but has seen a spike since the previous administration blamed, Asian American, Chinese Americans, and in turn all Asian Americans for COVID. Unfortunately, it wasn't just this racism wasn't bipartisan, right? Unfortunately, a lot of I think there was a certain elite, a group of Asian Americans that monopolized the conversation of race amongst us, and these were very like they would essentially talk over all of us, and they would be the only ones who would be heard by the ruling class, by white Americans, and they were the ones who were entrusted to talk about white supremacy. But of course, the biggest irony is that we would later find out that they were a part of it. I think one of the biggest things was that during the Black Lives Matter movement, there was Asian Americans were put in a very awkward position in that we were already being attacked by folks of all groups. We were already being gaslit by the elite ruling class, right? And now we were told that we needed to march and advocate for another group. And I think John and Josiah have brought up a lot of wonderful points about how, hey, listen, we've suffered from racism. They suffer from racism. There's a mutual connection. Let's do something about it, right? But that wasn't said. Instead, it was basically that elite group told us, you don't suffer from racism. You don't deal with what they do. You need to check your white adjacent privilege. It's like it created the opposite intended effect. And when I tried to bring that up to certain individuals, I was called the ignorant one. I was basically told to go screw myself. Right? Once again, by my own folks, by folks who were supposed to speak up for me. And many of us, if you saw the documentary The Way We Live, have had the experience. And of course, just as a refresher, DCC was a covert group for the first 6 months. And the reason why it became a public group was because my own schoolmate, Black woman, who gave her own presentation, her own speech, found out what I did. He's like, why? And she's like, why is the world silent about what we're doing? This is wrong. What's going on? And she's literally the reason why DC became public and why it spread the way it did. And that was just one of the first, few instances of that solidarity. First of many, but you'll see that the media never talks about it. The news never talks about that. The news will always talk about how Asian Americans are, the racist minority. The news will always talk about how Black folks are the attackers, or how, these attacks aren't happening, or they're suffering from this much, it's okay. But you'll never, ever see news about Black folks helping Asian Americans, right? You'll never see news about me. I don't want to be in the news for, strapping up folks who are not Asian. I don't want to get a cookie for that. But guess what? That's never part of the discourse, because the discourse that is comfortable to the ruling class is the narrative that we don't help one another. And as you know, that is factually untrue. Look at this room. Look at Brave. Look at DCC. Look at all of, you look at the track record of what DC has done and other groups have done, and you know what reality is. So yeah, I'll pass it on to Katrina.
So Katrina, if you could introduce yourself really quick and any thoughts you may have on the topic.
So I'm Katrina. I'm one of the members of DCC, and I'm training here. All I have to say is that I don't have much to add to this conversation. I think you guys are absolutely right. I just find it really frustrating that there are many people who were supporting BLM, many Asians who supported BLM. There are many people who supported, many Black and brown folks who supported Stop Asian Hate. And I'm not seeing a narrative being pushed anywhere. So, which is why when we had the podcast, I thought it was really important for us to push that thing out there. And I'm glad we're having this conversation. Unfortunately, it's kind of a hard thing to pare down, because I see all the you can see comments all over Instagram, all over Reddit, all over Twitter, and it's, I wouldn't say heartbreaking, but it's extremely disappointing. I think a good thing about, unfortunately, what's happening right now is that I'm also learning about our own history of collaborating, our own history of supporting one another, that, it aligns with what I have also experienced when I was growing up, that we're not at each other's throats. We can see eye to eye. We can have these conversations, and we have to. I want to keep speaking. I want to not keep being drowned out by what's happening. But I think there's a change happening with all these rallies, all of these talks. I think somehow that something's got to give, and I'm seeing, and somehow like I have this vague sense that I'm seeing it now in the online space, or in what's happening in New York right now. So I personally am trying to be positive. I'm trying to be, I'm just trying to look for what's really happening. So pass it to Nora or Milda.
I guess I can say something. I do kind of agree with like Katrina that I do think a lot of good can come out of like collaboration between like the Asian community and the Black community. But kind of like what Henry said, where it's like the communities were being pitted against each other. I remember reading things online, and I'm sorry if you've mentioned this already and I missed it, but I do remember seeing things online where people are like, no, we can't focus on anti-Asian racism right now because we're too focused on like Black Lives Matter and violence against Black people. And I'm like, you guys know that we're all capable of multitasking and we can care about more than one thing at the same time, right? It's like, that for me was really ridiculous. It's like, yeah, we can care about Black lives and we can care about Asian lives and we can work to support both. So yeah, I guess I can pass it on to Noah, see what he wants to say.
Yeah, basically, I'm also, optimistic about there'll be some changes happening, not just for, one group of people, but for everybody as human beings, the way it should be, instead of, have us compete like the Hunger Games, one race versus another. There are a lot of things that we are up against, definitely. People who like to weaponize certain phrases in order to diffuse or dismiss the entire point. People who like to basically take a certain standpoint and provide false knowledge on a subject. Like, for example, what happened with George Floyd when he got shot and everyone was protesting, and people were, the media and other unknown forces was trying to discredit him for everything to stop and be silent, and that's it. Like he was a criminal. He did this and that. Why are you protesting for a criminal? It's not because you're protesting for a criminal. It's because a cop who decided that he wants to take the law in his own hands, put his knee on his neck for a very long time, thus killing him. Point being is, yeah, I feel like we're going to win certain battles, but we have to prepare ourselves for others that may come in order to accomplish being completely united.
One thing that Noah has brought up, that I think Asian Americans have to see is this recurring trend that there's a willful ignorance in understanding what we go through, right? There's a blatant willful ignorance, right? For example, how did Black Lives Matter become only Black Lives Matter and not Black Lives Matter too, right? How does that come about? Yes, there are certain people who engage in horrific behavior, such as some of our own who have mistaken that to silence the other fellow Asians, and also it's also a matter of bad faith, right? If someone is screaming and yelling for their lives, right? You know, perhaps it's a good time to exercise good faith instead of not just bad faith, but horrific faith, right? How do you take a person who had the knee on their neck for so long and misinterpret it as, hey, these are people who are okay with you know, Sarah's with the victim's a criminal record, where obviously that's not the case, right? One, you know, we're not assuming that like, victims don't need to be perfectly innocent, right? They don't need to be perfect. There is such a thing, you know, even on TV tropes, there's a term called the asshole victim, right? That if you Google it, it's there, right? It is possible for someone to be a complete asshole in their lives and still be a victim of injustices and very severe injustices. And I see this happening with Asian Americans, both individuals and also the community in itself. For example, when Stop Asian Hate first became a hashtag, some people were like, well, why not just end white supremacy? Well, guess what? You've taken away the focus, right? You literally, these are the same people who understand why all lives matter as responsible Black Lives Matter is inappropriate. Why would you just say end white supremacy in response to Stop Asian Hate? Like, how do you not see that? Right? There's also people just nitpicking the term hate. There were entire articles written about why the term hate is reductive and inaccurate, and how, you know, we can't, how it assumes that if you say that term that you're dismissing the system, like factors in play, even though we're all part of Stop Asian Hate. We are talking about systemic factors, right? Once again, exercise of blatantly horrible faith, right? That's a form of racism. And even like when we, you know, like I have mentioned this many times, you know, almost ad nauseum, you know, my own origin story is that when I brought up the fact that Asian Americans were being silenced, it was misinterpreted as, oh, so you don't understand how bad other groups have it, right? And once again, that did not consider my history with, you know, my own history, you know, my own upbringing, whatnot. Only considered their own thoughts, right? Because people don't want to look at the facts. People don't want to look at the values. People don't want to look at nuance when nuance is appropriate, right? They only want nuance when they are comfortable. They're seeking not to help other people. They are simply seeking to be right in an argument. That's the basis of politics. Why it's horrible. And that's one of the things that I think, as you know, fellow minorities, we have to see that pattern, right? It's not which hashtag is better. It's not a debate about whose lives matter. It's about seeing the common trend. And one of the common trends is this idea of people exercising really horrifically bad faith when others are fighting and struggling for their lives.
Yeah, just to kind of build off what Henry said as well, is if people actually believe that all lives matter, we would be, you know, parallel working on all minority groups as well as the majority being equal. That's the funniest thing, is that, you know, the reason why we historically haven't backed up all lives matter is because there's this inherent belief that there are certain lives that matter more than others. Okay? You know, we just want to say that again, if all lives matter, then everyone should be treated equally, right? Also, to Milda's point before as well, you know, we kind of hide behind social media, behind the keys of a message board.
Yeah, I mean, like when I first started helping China with like in supporting Brave, I was very vocal about why I went to go support Brave, what was happening to the Asian community, what was happening in Manhattan in general. And that's what made me come from Staten Island all the way to Manhattan that day, just to get there. I mean, I actually did hop quite a few trains to get there, but it was just like, even on that social media post alone, people do hide behind keyboards to have views, to share their views, because I mean, somebody was trying to say that I was one of the good ones for trying to support like that in Chinatown. It's just like, what do you mean by a good one? There's no need to have that type of outlook, because if you do that, that's already going to cause misunderstanding. That's already going to be bad discourse. That's saying something good, but in bad faith. So, I mean, a lot of the social media is toxic, which is why we have to stay there on social media and help regulate those things that are going on and help talk about situations like that.
Noah, you have something to add?
Yeah, just to bring up what Brother Mance is saying too, it kind of reminds me of the line in the Constitution that says all men are created equal, or are they? Or will they use that word to actually diffuse the racial discussions about race in general? Because I too also had, had that said to me. It's like, you are one of the good ones. So it's kind of not kind of, it totally just dismisses me as a human being, first of all. Second of all, it just makes us feel as a group as, some sort of like alien or something, which is not the case. I think people that usually, try to say things to diffuse, the real issues at hand, realistic issues such as race, and people are dying because of their racial background, or would rather live in the privileges that society has given to them, and live in their own illusion, and basically, think their illusion is real, rather than being realistic and acknowledge that all these issues exist.
I know that John wants to segue into sort of our next, onto like some concrete things that we are facing that will make these tensions even worse. But just Noah and Josiah, I just want to first of all just thank you both for helping out, doing what you do. Noah, for you being there beginning. And I too find it really fucked up that you guys get called the good ones, right? Because why not the inverse? Why we have seen unfortunately horrific attacks on Asian Americans, um, from other Black Americans, and that has a very that there's a level of bitterness in there for each and every one of us, right? And why don't we call them the messed up ones? Why aren't they the fucked up ones, right? Why is it always inverse, where the people who do just decent human shit are called the good ones, right? Are called a criteria group, right? Why can't we all live as individuals? And that's kind of the burden that racism places on us, right? And we just want to be able to live freely. This is one of the reasons why we can't. Now, with that being said, there are unfortunately two very pressing issues, and why we brought this topic, right, that are coming to Chinatown. The first is the Chinatown mega jail. We all know that Rikers used to drop all their inmates, former inmates, into Hell's Kitchen. And even though there aren't that many Asian Americans there, there's plenty of hate crimes on Asians there, right? So imagine dropping a jail in Chinatown where there is no bus because it's not a middle island. What's going to happen there? The second thing are sort of Chinatown already has multiple homeless shelters, multiple, and they're going to now build they're going to build more shelters. The most highly contested one, the one that is most concerning, is the one on Grand and Bowery for two particular reasons. Number one, Grand Street Station is literally the same block where Christina Unily was murdered, along with a plethora of other hate crimes. And this is on top of the fact that TCBUA and Delta have done support missions there. We have equipped many of the folks in that area, and the attacks still happen. Dropping a shelter, and essentially, I forgot what the term is. Some kind of a certain site, I believe. Sorry, the term escaped me. On that area will only make things more difficult and more violent than it already will be. So this is going to be up. So this is once again, this is going to pit And unfortunately, many of the folks who are going to be drawn there, unfortunately, do come from other marginalized groups. So this will make things, more divisive than it already is.
Yeah, so I just want to
Yes.
make a correction for Henry, is that there's 4 already approved community shelters with an additional 3, okay? So that's something to consider. It's not just one community shelter in Chinatown that's currently being planned. So I just want to make that.
Yes. Oh, yeah, it's multiple, with one being the most concerning. But yes, there are multiple.
That is very concerning, actually. I mean, the fact that they're even thinking of building a jail anyway. I remember actually back when one of the attacks happened, where this grown man, he had a history of violence, and every time he got picked up, every time they put him in lockup, they let him right out. And this man murdered his own mother. And he's not under the jail for that. And he's out here just attacking people. That woman that he knocked out wasn't even the only person that he attacked that day. And they were thinking of letting him out right after anyway. So he might even be on the streets now. If they can't even keep people like that in jail, they couldn't even keep him in Rikers. If they build something here like that, they're going to be letting all types of people with mental health issues, all types of people that have different problems, and even with this increase in racism and their perspective anyway, it's going to be extremely harmful to any community that you're putting it in. Because I like how John was saying before, they didn't put this in the Upper East Side, they're not planning any of these in the Upper West Side, they're not planning any of these they're not even putting it upstate. If you put it upstate, where are they gonna hurt nobody? Put it in the Adirondack Mountains. You can put it in the Catskills.
Well, the funny thing actually is the correctional facilities out there actually have more correctional officers than they actually do have inmates in some of the prisons.
You could rehabilitate those areas, repurpose them to keep people like that. If they have problems, help them through them. If they are murderers, if they're killers, things like that, put them up there, because it's better for them to deal with a bear, entangle with a bear, than attacking an elderly woman across the street. It's just like, it makes no sense. There are many things that you can repurpose. There's a lot of money. And a lot of this homeless situation, it costs more money to let homelessness go on. And these people that struggle, and they'll go insane from their struggles. I was talking to a homeless person not too long ago that said that he's even been seeing other homeless people have anti-Asian view for no reason. And these people have been like homeless since the 90s. It takes more money to let this problem perpetuate than it does to even solve homelessness. It takes less money to solve homelessness than to let it keep going on. But it's just like, there is a certain paradigm that America wants to keep with everybody fighting, and they want a certain point of controlled chaos to go around. And that, I feel like that's the reason why they want centers like this in the heart of straight up cities. It makes no sense. It only helps the crime rate. We're supposed to be trying to decrease it, decompress it, and that's not what they're doing. So it's clearly an agenda. And that agenda is to get everybody fighting, because if everybody on the bottom is too busy fighting each other over a penny, well, they won't notice the people upstairs with a nickel. So it just makes New York worse. And I mean, building a jail in such a big populated area like this, with crime on the rise, and with the mayor wanting to bring back stop and frisk and things like that, which already put a lot of people away. And even the cops were allowed to plant things on people and stuff like that. They targeted Black communities, they targeted Hispanic communities. They have target communities as well. A lot of the time when jails are built like this, or they make new prisoner programs or rehabilitation centers or things like that, they usually want to aim at certain groups of people for an agenda as well. And they don't even go for the people that need to be put there. They make all types of stops on, you could be a kid playing basketball on the street, they stop you for some reason, they'll plant something on you. If not even that, they'll just find the problem. They'll try to get you aggro, they'll aggravate you, make you say something that you don't want to say, or say something that you shouldn't have said. and they'll put you away. They target the Black community like that often. They target the Hispanic community like that or very often. But doing something like this is probably to try and cause more inflammatory sentiments between different communities of people, because you know that they're going to try and arrest more people of African American descent or Afro-Latino descent or Hispanic descent in general. That's usually what New York's target audience is when it comes to putting people in like these centers. Yeah.
Okay. You know, I'm just gonna go back to San Francisco. It's like a fucking war zone. You have a news company organization going to a fucking bodega store. And guess what? There's like 5 or 6 homeless people just stealing shit. And it's as if all the money that the businesses pay, it does not go into anything to protect the businesses, right? And so it's like over here, you get a guy who fucking kills 70 people back to back over the course of 3 years. He's let out the next day. I mean, it's like this. If the crimes and punishment is not strict, this is going to continue happening. It's like saying, fucking test me, motherfucker. All right. And then just dare me to keep doing worse and worse things while somebody in the government is going to be pocketing some money and, you know, like kind of turn the blind eye. All right. It's like a convenience, you know, so I will not even believe, or I hope I live to see that, you know, the laws are going to be strict and enforced finally, you know, but, you know, if none of that shit happens, I don't know why I'm paying my taxes for. I wish all businesses just fucking close down just so that they get their fucking, you know.
So Alex, I want to just make something clear, right? Is the fact that, you know, there are certain minority groups, and purely by the color of your skin, you're also charged with additional crimes.
Oh, of course.
than what you are pursuing. And so I just want to make sure that that is clear, right?
I'm very clear about that.
Okay.
I have a friend, right? I really shouldn't be saying this, but I have a friend who committed murder. He was Asian, all right? And he was charged. He had a life sentence, but he did not spend one night in jail because he was Asian, because it was overpopulated, the prison in California, right? That's, you know, so I'm very well aware, right? That even if they are charged, they might not serve their term, okay? So I just want to, you know, put that out there. This is not just only specific to him, but probably a lot of people for that matter.
Family members locked up for murder just on suspicion. They didn't even know if they did it or not, and they still locked them up.
Mhm.
Right.
Wow.
All right, that's all you have to say.
Yeah. You know, we live in this world where it's like whatever we get, it's like an evil genie, right? When we ask for people to, when we're like, hey, listen, can we not like lock up people suspected of drug charges like forever and have them lose their lives? They're like, okay, yeah, sure, we'll do that. And by the way, we're gonna also let murderers loose. And when someone kills an Asian, we're gonna lecture you about how the carceral state isn't the solution. It's like, that's not what I asked for, right? And then you know, you ask for, you know, and then when we ask for stricter rules, like, oh, do you mean we're gonna like find the living crap out of everyone trying to make a business and like jail everyone for nonviolent offenses? Like, no, that's not what we asked for. To misunderstand us, and like, give us what we asked for in like the worst possible terms. And I don't know what else we could do other than just, I guess, be clear about what we want, and also, you know, make sure that, you know, our wishes are not misinterpreted, are not misunderstood, you know, and are not exploited, taken advantage of. So thank you all for being here.
Yeah, I kind of agree with what Henry says about like people being kind of like the whole prison reform. I understand sometimes the intentions are good, but it's not always thought out well, because like Henry said, like they'll take people accused of like drug charges and stick them in prison, when it's like a lot of times if they're users, they need treatment, but then like they'll let people go, but then like it's kind of like a blanket, like, oh, we're letting everyone go and they let violent criminals go. And like I think reform needs to be like more nuanced, and they really need to be like more careful, and they can't do like blanket, like, oh yeah, we're going to apply this to everyone. And the problem with it is that a lot of people get thrown in prison when they need other resources and other sort of help. And I'm not sure if like if you guys have read anything about like countries like other countries like Portugal. Portugal has like cleaned up its drug issue so well, and they really provide people with the treatment that they need. And I'm like, hey, we already have an example to go off of. Why can't we implement a similar system here? And like, it would be so much more effective than just tossing everyone in jail. When also, like when you think of like nonviolent criminals and things like that, that's like a lot of those people need help and compassion, and like throwing them in jail isn't really gonna help. So I do find that a lot of times the reforms are just not helpful. And yeah, like Henry said, everyone just either gets thrown in jail or everyone gets released, and it's not really helpful. We're not really learning anything. And again, these people need other resources. And I guess I can pass it on to Noah now.
Yeah, thank you, Milda. New jails is not going to solve problems. It's just going to bring more problems. Rikers Island is just polluted as hell, basically. We don't know if this new jail's piping system, because inmates do crazy stuff, like, pissing, drinking, fountain, the unthinkable. Suppose it does poison the drinking water in Chinatown. You know what I mean? Because they have not thought this through when they said, "Oh, we're just gonna put a new mega jail in Chinatown," and not even think of neighborhoods like maybe Cute Gardens. Oh, that's too nice, or maybe Howard Beach. Oh, that's too nice, either, or maybe some nice place like maybe out in like Long Island or something. I don't think they got together and actually did a risk assessment on anything. It's just like, hey, let's pick a place where no one wants to be and just put it there. Just put it anywhere. It's just for profit. And that's the problem with people, thinking all about profit over human lives. They just do the bare minimum in order to get paid.
May I go? Okay. So I just want to say, look, the jails, you have the news report, right? That there is these people, the employees, right? They fucking take 70 to 200 days back-to-back sick days, right? So what I'm saying is that, and they take pictures that they're in Cancun or Puerto Rico, great, right? And they're sick supposedly, right? Yeah. So the solution is not to build a fucking jail. The unions have to get with the program to train the workers to actually, do what they're supposed to do, what they're paying, some 6 figures for, right? But instead, what do? They jerk off, right? And that's the unfortunate part about the whole thing. You know what I'm saying? That's the fucking unfortunate part about the whole thing. The supervisor who tried to reprimand the actions of the person who took some 200 days back to back, because she was in union, she got fired right away. For sure. Now that is some fucking bullshit. So what I'm saying is that the government has to get with the fucking program. Stop sucking us dry with the fucking money, doing nothing, and keep just putting it in your pockets. Stop doing that fucking shit. Actually do something and prove that you are here for the people, all right? Because otherwise, probably we'll all revolt and not pay you a fucking penny. And that's the way we have to, show you how it's done.
That's what we got to do.
I hate to say it.
I actually do. I do agree that the government has to do something, but see, I'm already under the suspicion with what they've historically done in America that they're not here for our interest. This is just a new type of plantation where everybody's on it.
Yeah, I never thought slavery was gone. By the way, never did. Not even now. The conditions are different, but I believe it still exists. All right, and we are the very examples of that. Slaves on a You know, like how they say broken a different level, say Jay-Z lost all his money. He's just broken a different level. We're just slaves on a different level now. All right.
Yeah, sure. That's pretty much that's pretty much how I see it, because the government doesn't have our interest at heart. They've thrown us away. They've drafted us for wars we don't need to be in. If it didn't make money, notice how they minded their damn business when it was something that didn't make money. If it was a war in Africa, we wasn't going there unless there was money. America's a nation that literally forced its own people, overtaxed its own people, blew up its own ships near Vietnam just so
And
they could declare
cities.
war.
And cities, you can't forget about Black Harlem, right?
Yeah, Black Wall Street,
Black Wall Street. Yeah.
Central Park. Central Park used to be a black neighborhood. They tore it down, burnt it down, just so that they could make it a park because tourist attraction, money. If it doesn't make money, the government don't want it. And if everybody's getting treated right, that don't make no money. Chaos makes money, struggle makes money, and oppression makes money. And if they can do that to some degree to everybody, they'll be able to make as much money as possible. And they say, fuck you to us. It is what it is.
Obviously, we are very all passionate about what's going on, right? So again, and one thing that affects minority groups altogether, regardless of where we are, right? We are a minority for a reason. If and if there was a mega jail built in any other part of this city, personally, I can speak for myself, right? I would be right there to protest. There's no need for an additional jail anywhere within the city limits. There really isn't, because there's constantly this justification from leadership, from mayoral campaigns, like we have to reduce crime. Is this the actual way to reduce crime? By incarcerating more people, expecting more people to be incarcerated, and also piggybacking off of prison labor. Milda, if you want to talk about that more.
Yeah, when I think your name is Alex. So I'm sorry I missed the beginning. Yes, yeah, you talked about how like slavery has never really ended, and it hasn't. And it's like, oh yeah, the 13th Amendment freed all the slaves, and it's like, no, it just says slavery it's not acceptable unless it's used as a form of punishment. So you do have chain gangs, you do have prison labor, and like a lot of people are like, oh no, our jobs are being shipped out overseas, and I'm like, no, they're being taken to prisons, and people are being exploited, and people are purposely being sent to prison and kept there longer so they can be exploited as a cheap source of labor. And that is really, really problematic. And then you have people who are like, oh yeah, these immigrants, they come here and take care of jobs. It's like, no, companies are just sending them to prison and exploiting people. And like, not a lot has been done for that. And like for-profit prisons play into that too, because like, you shouldn't be able to make a profit off of human suffering, and I'm sorry, I think your name is the person sitting next to Alex. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, but like when you were saying we don't need any more jails, like I agree with that. It's like put them upstate or somewhere else, because I think John or Henry, someone shared an article, and in the article they spoke about like an assessment that was made where it's like, well, if we actually use the existing prisons, we can like get by perfectly fine without building this new jail. But no one wants to use the existing prisons, and it's like, why not? Because like you don't really need this jail. It's just another way to ruin a community, to like exploit people, just to like ruin people's lives. Yeah, I guess I can pass it on to whoever is next.
Okay, I mean, I just want to say this last thing. There's a lot of people, they just want this world to be united and, be harmonious and prosper and, have all these inequalities diminish. There's a lot of people, and I don't lose sight of those people. I'm one of them. Unfortunately, these conditions I'm living with, these are the realities of it. So, I hope I live to see the day that, yeah, good people stick together. We live in communities that we don't have to talk about these matters anymore. Hopefully they all, at least diminish a great deal from what it is, so, I want us to continue to fight the good fight, and, I really want to see it before I die. Otherwise, this world is, very depressing the way it is.
And doomed.
And doomed, for that matter.
I mean, again, I so enjoy like the conversations that we have here, unless anyone else has anything to add. Feel free. Go off mute. All right. So, I mean, the inter-organizational and, even interracial conversations that, we haven't had up until now need to continue to happen. And I'm so glad to have been able to share this space with all of you, and to speak honestly and truthfully about, how we individually feel. So with that, I'd like to close out, and let Alex close this out very well, very elegantly. Again, we're very full of hate. When you start finding out about these issues and start learning about and researching it on your own, you realize that, as much as we are a melting pot here in New York City, there's still social, equity, social injustice that we still need to combat on a day-to-day basis. So with that, I bid you guys adieu. I thank you guys so much for joining, and hopefully you'll join us for Fireside Chat number 5, which will be next week. So again, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you. Thank you. Have a good night.
Good night, guys. Thank you.